Located on West 72nd Street in Manhattan, the 19th Century Dakota building is one of New York's most exclusive residences, and has been a magnet for the rich and famous since it opened in 1884. But despite its opulence, it has a mysterious and tragic past, and it's long been believed the place is cursed. Here we look at the creepy and sometimes heartbreaking events that are linked to this iconic and haunted building. Hit those lights, sit back, and enjoy. Deaths at the Dakota. Perhaps the most well-known death at the Dakota was that of John Lennon, the former Beatle, who on the evening of December 8, 1980, was fatally shot in the archway of the Dakota, his residence at the time. The perpetrator was Mark Chapman, who fired 5 hollow-point bullets into the back of Lennon, 4 of which hit him. Despite efforts to save him, Lennon had 0 chance of survival. Lennon's death was probably the biggest shock to the world since the assassination of JFK. However, he was not the first death closely associated with the Dakota building. Its first victim was its original owner way back in 1882. His name was Edward Clark, who was the founder of the Singer Sewing Machine Company. Clark spent $1 million to have the Dakota built in the 1880s. He even had a special apartment built for his family that included sterling silver floors. But sadly, he never got to live in it, as 2 years before the building was completed, he died, becoming the Dakota's first victim. Then there was Russian composer Peter Tchaikovsky, who sought permission to move into his apartment before the rest of the building work was completed. But sadly, he didn't have long to enjoy his new luxury surroundings, because he died shortly after in mysterious circumstances at the age of 53. His cause of death is up for debate. Some say it was from cholera after drinking unboiled water at a restaurant, while others believe he committed suicide. Another well-known celebrity, the actress Judy Holliday, spent the last years of her life at the Dakota in apartment number 77 before she died of cancer in 1965 at the age of just 43. Other celebrities who met untimely deaths who had links to the building were Judy Garland, who lived there, and Marilyn Monroe, who did a photo shoot there. However, as well as the deaths of residents, there is also the curse of Rosemary's Baby that used the exterior of the building in the film. Our video on haunted film sets will give you lots more information on that one. But despite the numerous tragedies linked with the building, perhaps the biggest risk to the residents lives when the place was built, when the decision taken by the head architect, Henry J. Ardenberg, who decided not to incorporate fire escapes into the design of the building. Instead, he used fireproofing methods, such as putting mud between the brick flooring layers. And with 10 floors and 103 apartments, this was a potential life-threatening decision. Although it didn't seem to deter potential residents, because for 45 years after it opened, the building had 0 vacancies. And even today, only the chosen few are allowed to live there, and even celebrities such as Madonna and Billy Joe have been rejected by the building's super selective board. The Crying Lady and the Young Girl. Now, with all the deaths linked to the Dakota, it's no surprise the place is riddled with paranormal activity and ghosts, and one of these is known as the Crying Lady, an apparition that has been spotted numerous times, and one even John Lennon claimed to have seen when he lived in the building. It was Lennon himself that named her the Crying Lady. Allegedly, she can be seen walking the halls of the building and is thought to be the ghost of Elise Vesley, the former manager of the Dakota, who worked there between the 1930s and 50s. It's said that in life, she was into all things paranormal and believed she had psychokinetic powers. But after she suffered the loss of her son, who was killed when he was hit by a truck outside the Dakota, her personality changed and she was never the same again. She became unusually nice to everyone and was also very protective of the children that lived in the building. And many believe she carried this protection on after her death and still patrols the halls of the Dakota to make sure all the children are safe. It says that Elise may also be linked to another ghost known as the Young Girl, who has been seen bouncing a red ball down the halls and is often seen entering or exiting closets. The young girl was first spotted by painters who described her as wearing a yellow dress that nearly matched her blonde hair, white stockings, and black silver-buckled shoes. They claimed she looked at them and said, "It's my birthday," before disappearing down a hall. Not long after the encounter, one of the painters died when he fell off a scaffolding and down the stairwell, and ever since the incident, people are wary of the young girl, believe she holds some sort of curse. The ghost of Edward Cabot Clark and Joe Mielziner. In the late 1930s, an electrician called John Painter was working at the Dakota, and according to him, the wiring of the building was very strange, with bits and bobs he'd never seen before, and often he had to take pieces of the wiring home to try and work them out. But one night he stayed late at the Dakota, working in the basement, trying to sort out the odd circuits. When out of the shadows appeared a short man. He wore a frock coat and a winged collar, and had small steel-rimmed glasses propped on his very large nose. He also had a beard and was wearing what looked like a wig. The man walked up to Painter and angrily glared at him. He then pulled off his wig and violently shook it in Painter's face before vanishing. Painter had 4 more run-ins with this short, wigged ghost, and never figured out who it was until he saw a picture of Edward Cabot Clark, the man who commissioned the Dakota, and he instantly recognized him as the man he had seen in the basement. Apparently Clark, who died before the Dakota was finished, wasn't all that impressed with Painter messing with his building, and Edward Clark wasn't the only man to be upset with changes being made to the Dakota. In 1976, Joe Mielziner, considered the greatest set designer of the golden age of Broadway, who had lived in the Dakota for years, was hit by a cab and killed outside of the building. As well as being a set designer, he also designed parts of the interior of the Dakota, and in the weeks that followed his death, workers at the Dakota were besieged by something flinging things across the basement. A porter also witnessed a shovel fly off the wall and land in the middle of the room, as well as bags of garbage flying around. Startled by what he saw, the porter called one of the residents, a man called Wilbur Ross, and when he arrived, he claims a large iron bar came off of the wall and flew at him, landing at his feet. When he tried to move it, it was so heavy that he couldn't lift it. Phantom of the Dakota. One of the most frightening spirits at the Dakota is the ominously named Phantom of the Dakota, sometimes known as the Mad Slasher. He is another spirit who seemed to object to any changes within the building. He never actually harmed anyone, but he certainly made his presence felt. As previously mentioned, Joe designed a few things for the Dakota's interior, and one of the things he designed before his death was the new elevator system. However, shortly after it was installed, it became apparent that someone or something was trying to destroy it. Giant slashes appeared on the panelled walls that were too high to have been done by a child, and the damage looked like it must have been done with a knife. The cuts were so deep, whoever inflicted them must have been very strong. Every week, the panels would be replaced, only to be slashed again a few days later. At the same time this was happening, strange piles of shredded paper were found in the halls of the 9th floor, stacked up in a way that implies someone was looking to start a fire. Residents began to become suspicious of each other, and accusations started flying around. But things got worse when a can of paint fell from the roof into the courtyard below, just missing a tenant. The strange thing was that there was no painting or renovation happening at the time, so there was no reason for a can of paint to be on the roof. Residents began to wonder, was this an accident or a deliberate act? The only way to know for sure was to try and catch the perpetrator in the act, so a group of residents took it upon themselves to set up secret surveillance. They would arrange themselves in hiding places and watch the comings and goings between the various buildings. But sadly, all that they discovered was that a lot of the residents seemed to be having affairs with each other, and there was no sign of the Mad Slasher, who seemed to have disappeared as quickly as he appeared. Many believe this was again the work of the disgruntled Edward Clark, once again unhappy with the precious building being messed with. Celebrity ghosts. Now this list wouldn't be complete without mentioning the ghost of John Lennon. The first reported sighting of his ghost was in 1983, when Joey Harrow and Amanda Moores spotted him standing near the spot he was murdered at the entrance to the Dakota. Harrow claims that Lennon was surrounded by an ominous light, and Moores said that she went to walk towards Lennon, but the look on his face suggested he wasn't in any mood to talk to strangers. After all, he had been shot by one just 3 years earlier, but probably the most famous sighting of Lennon was by his wife, Yoko Ono, who lived with him at the Dakota building at the time of his death, and still lives there to this day. She claims she saw the spirit of John sitting at his white piano in their apartment, and he turned to her and said, "Don't be afraid, I am still with you," before vanishing. Over the years, other witnesses have also claimed to have seen Lennon's ghost in various parts of the Dakota building. Another former celebrity resident, Judy Holliday, has also made her presence felt. After her death in 1965, Holliday's apartment was sold, and the new owners hired 3 men to redecorate the former star's home. All 3 of the men claimed they saw a ghost that had the body of a man in his 20s and the face of a child. And one of the workers also alleges he saw the spirit of a boy aged around 10 years old, who emitted a musty odour. Another of the painters claimed he was doing touch-ups on a large closet when the door slammed and the lights went out. He then felt something grab his arm. Many believe Holliday is responsible for this activity, possibly annoyed at the changes to her apartment. But that is not the only apartment that experiences strange activity. Just above it, on the 3rd floor, was the home of Frederick and Suzanne Weinstein. They claimed that during the time they lived there, they experienced all sorts of paranormal activity. That included unexplained noises, as well as rugs and chairs moving on their own. It seemed the spirit disliked Frederick, who found himself repeatedly injured, especially in the dining room. Chairs were pulled out from under him, he was pushed by someone who wasn't there, and on multiple occasions, it seemed like a rug was being pulled from under his feet. On another occasion, Frederick was coming home from work and saw a light on through his living room window. But what was confusing was the light was coming from a crystal chandelier, even though there wasn't one there. He thought that maybe Suzanne had installed it as a surprise, but when he got to his apartment, the light turned off and there was no chandelier. Although strangely, he did find bolts in the ceiling where a chandelier had once been installed. But perhaps the creepiest thing to happen to Frederick happened after he played an Ouija board style game with his children. The game used lettered tiles instead of the board and pointer, and during the game, the spirit messages suggested that the Weinsteins were in contact with the ghost of a little girl, possibly the young girl that got blamed for the death of a painter in the 30s. When the game was over, Frederick put all the pieces away, stacking the word tiles on a bookshelf. But days later, Frederick found 2 of the word tiles in his pockets of his suit. He then came across a 3rd tile in his glasses case. The 3 letters on the tiles supposedly were ICU. So that's 5 incredibly creepy facts about the Dakota building in Manhattan, easily one of New York's most haunted and mysterious buildings. If you're enjoying all of these creepy videos this October, then you'll love our Ghost Hunters Field Manual on Amazon. It's only a short little book, and perfect for reading in the dark with some music on. Don't forget to check it out by clicking on the link in the description or in the comments section. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next video.